for mitral valve lesions, MS, and we will be discussing only primary MR, not secondary MR today, and with the surgical management for the same. So before going directly to the guidelines, 2020 guidelines, we should know some basic stages of mitral stenosis and mitral regurgitation. So they have classified these stages into four categories: A, B, C, D, according to the valvular anatomy and hemodynamics and its consequences and the symptoms. So as the severity of the anatomy, as the severity of the hemodynamics, according to the mitral area, goes more severe, the stage increases, and the symptomatic stage comes in category stage B. So this figure of mitral valve area, why they have taken mitral valve area as 1.5 is basically this is the area according to the studies that cardiac output becomes normal and the symptoms starts rising. So this is the cutoff. So we can say it's a significant MS or not, and the risk becomes symptomatic or asymptomatic severe MS. In this hemodynamic consequences, they have taken the categories like LA, the consequence on the LA enlargement because of MS, and even the ES systolic pressures. And as this goes further severity and symptoms increase further. So, according to these new guidelines, they have categorized the guidelines
Jagdish,
according to the etiology. Hello?
sorry to
Huh.
interrupt. Sir, is the voice breaking just for me, or is his voice breaking in general? I would like an input here.
Yeah, voice is breaking.
Yeah, voice is breaking for us also.
Um,
Jatish, can you log out and log back in?
sir, okay, sir.
Might just fix it.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, slides are visible now. जतेश म्यूटेड हो आप।
हेलो।
हाँ, आप ठीक है।
ओके ओके, थैंक यू। Okay, so the ACC has categorized their guidelines according to the basic etiology as rheumatic MS and non-rheumatic MS. And the main factor to distinguish in the initial stage is the mitral valve area, whether it is a severe MS with the area less than 1.5 or progressive MS of area more than 1.5. And further, the patient was categorized in symptomatic and asymptomatic stage D and C. And if in severe MS and symptomatic patient, you have got pliable valve, that means favorable valve morphology, that means mobile and relatively thin leaflets and free of calcium in the subvalvular area, and there is no clot or thrombus in the LA, and there is a less than moderate MR. Then the class 1 indication is for uh, percutaneous mitral valve commissurotomy. But if the patient does not have these favorable features for a PMBC, and severe symptoms are still present, we have to note down that severe symptoms means NYHA 3 and 4 only, because rheumatic patients are it's a chronic disease. So the patient should be followed regularly if the not for PMBC, and surgery is considered in only severe symptomatic patients only. Uh, and if patient is surgical candidate, then patient go for surgery. And according to ACC, the surgery, if possible, the repair should be done. Otherwise, replacement. And a patient is not surgical candidate, then he is considered as class 2B for PMBC. Now, suppose patient is asymptomatic in severe MS, and the valve morphology is favorable for PMBC. Now, we have to consider PA systolic pressure. If it is more than 50, that means patient is having pulmonary changes, pulmonary systolic pressure in high pressure changes because of MS. Then patient go under 2A category. And if the AF is present in the patient, in asymptomatic patient, then also the patient is considered for PMBC, because AF is equivalent for symptom onset, and the it also signifies that it's a progressive LA damage is happening, and AF increases the stroke events, and the fast ventricular response because of AF will decrease the diastolic filling and increase the LV pressures as well. So better to with some intervention. Now, if patient is in, if mitral valve area is more than 1.5 centimeter square, that means it's a and increasing, and that means it's a progressive MS, and patient is having only exertional symptoms. So um, we can uh, we can clarify all the settings of these patients with the stress test also. And in if stress test, the hemodynamically significant MS is there, then we can go for again interventions. We have to note. See, if I see this stages of MS, they have not mentioned anything about transpulmonary. As transpulmonary gradient is highly dependent on the transvalvular flow rate and diastolic filling period and heart rate as well. So they have not mentioned in the severity criteria for this case. But we know that the 5 to 10 of the value of transpulmonary gradient comes under the significant severe MS. Now, we talk about non-rheumatic calcific MS. These patients are considered for class 2B for surgery, because the difference between rheumatic and non-rheumatic will be uh, in these patients there will be poor prognosis, because obviously because of age and comorbidities, as it's a calcific MS and it happens more often in older patients. And this non-rheumatic MS can also present from with the radiation therapy as well, and even after the repair with the small angioplasty rings. And these patients have severe mitral annular calcification, which makes the this implantation of the valve challenging, and there is a residual MS after MVR. So it's better to uh, wait for severe symptomatic patients only for surgical intervention, and even for them, it's a very high risk surgeries. Now, if we talk about acute MR, in these new guidelines, uh, they have not mentioned as such a class 1 or something, but the prompt mitral valve surgery is preferably mitral repair, if possible, is a life saving in these symptomatic patients with acute severe primary MRs. If we talk about stages of chronic primary MR, the same definition of MR goes with this goes with the MS, that like anatomy and hemodynamic changes and hemodynamic consequences. If we see in this, as the stage and grading of primary MR increases, this valve hemodynamics जो values हैं, central jet MR, vena contracta, all these volumetric and quantitative assessments, they are not considered all together in the same patient. The cumulative value of these is important, not the single one. And the same stage as C and D with the severe MR and according to the symptoms. And if the main problem is with the LV dysfunction, because if LV declines towards 60%, or when LV is unable to contract to a and systolic diameter is 40, it is the onset of the LV dysfunction. So the correction of MR before these irreversible changes can be curative, and we will discuss in the next slide that this value is important, because and these symptoms in the stage D, these are the consequences of this pathophysiology of MR, which may indicate the LV and LA compliance, and increase in the PA pressures and RV functions, decrease in the RV functions, like that. This uh, primary MR, they have started their this 2020 guidelines with the whether the patient is having severe MR or not, according to these stages. And if the patient is symptomatic, and so we don't have to see whether patient is having LV functions, regardless of any infect any LV functions, we have to straight away go for class 1 mitral valve surgery. Only in cases where there is a high surgical risk with the uh, unfavorable and favorable anatomy for, and these patients can go for transcatheter mitral valve repairs. Otherwise, the mitral valve surgery is the class 1. And according to the etiology, we have to decide whether we should go for straight away surgery in class 1. Like degenerative have important good outcomes after repair, and if possible, it's a class 1 indication for degenerative. And for rheumatic mitral valve disease, it's a class 2B, because the outcomes have not been much more favorable. It's like 50% in the last 20 years of repair. And now if a patient is asymptomatic due to MR, so then we have to go for LV systolic dysfunction, or whether it's not there.
So the values of LVEF less than 60% and end systolic diameter of more than 40 millimeter. If this is the onset, then we should go for class 1 indication mitral valve surgery. And if the ejection fraction is still more than 60% and end systolic diameter is less than 40 millimeters, so and suppose the patient is having the surgical mortality less than 1% and there is a 95% chance for durable repair, then it's a class 2A category. And if it is not there and um, uh, there is a progressive increase in the LV size or decrease in ejection fraction in at least 3 studies, it's a class 2B for mitral valve repair or replacement. So ejection fraction is used as a key determinant of LV functions in timing the MR intervention. Um, and the onset of symptoms that results from um, severity of MR, it will worsen even when the LV function appears to be normal. That's why they have kept mitral valve surgery as class 1. So the goal of therapy in MR will be to um, correct it before the onset of LV systolic dysfunction and its significant subsequent um, adverse effects. If we see this graph, which was published in 2013, so the as the severity of the symptoms is increasing, the uh, percentage of survival even after mitral valve surgery has been decreased. Like in NYHA 3 and 4, there has been survival reduced to less than 50% in NYHA 3, NYHA 4. And whether when NYHA 1 and 2 mild symptoms, the survival was much higher. So the earlier, the better. Now, if we see this chart, the preoperative ejection fraction, if you see the in the A diagram, preoperative ejection fraction when it was if 60%, then postoperative ejection fraction is also 55%. So if the as the ejection fraction is going down, the post-operative ejection fraction is becoming more lesser. So better to operate before this condition. And same happens with the end systolic diameter. If the end systolic diameter is less than 40, the outcomes on post-operative ejection fraction is much better when we are talking about more than 40 of ejection systolic diameters. Uh, Here the late survival of the patients after surgical correction of MR has been described. So in this, when this blue line denotes the ejection fraction of 60%, and 50 to 60% ejection fraction is the pink line. So if you see, there's a very big difference, 72% and 53% in the percentage of survival. In the slight difference in the ejection fraction. But that's why they have made the cutoff of 60%, because there's a much difference between 50 to 60% and 60%. And less than 50% is only 32% survival in 10 years. Now we come to the surgical management. Um, So before going to the surgical management, we should talk about surgical approaches we are going to handle. The most classic one is median sternotomy, which is the most commonly used. And there are some minimally invasive approaches like right thoracotomy, upper mini sternotomy, lower mini sternotomy, right mini thoracotomy, and even robotically. And this is based on the patient factors, surgeon's experience, and need for the combination with other procedures. This diagram of the chest shows the right thoracotomy, which is in the fourth intercostal space in the anterolateral area. And the advantages of this minimally invasive will be there will be post-operative bleeding and transfusion will be lesser in these minimally invasive approaches. The length of stay will be lesser in the hospital, and there will be good outcomes in the post-operative pain, and cosmetic benefits will be there. The cost of the patient treatment will be better, and normal activities will be returned in time. And in this thoracotomy, there is one more advantage, that infection resistant. This is the approach, and because of this, when you do the thoracotomy, there is an overlying muscle which is protecting, which is making the seal in the surgical site. But the disadvantage of this minimally invasive approaches, as we are going for peripheral CPB. So there will be a slightly higher risk of 30-day initial risk of a stroke and even aortic dissection, injury, groin infection, like that. If we see this diagram, despite this p-value is 0.8, it's not that significant, but this study showed that there was a better survival than open median sternotomy approach than MICS was. The survival was better. In this first diagram, there is a upper mini sternotomy, and second diagram is showing the lower mini sternotomy. And this is the robotically assisted approach, where we will be having this working area, and the camera ports will be there, left robotic and arms, and atrial retractor arms will be there. And this partial sternotomy, upper mini and lower mini, it's better choice in the small femoral vessels, where you cannot go for peripheral CPB. And even in peripheral arterial disease also, this is okay. This is good for those patients who want minimally invasive approaches. Now, this is a very good 10 commandments for mitral valve repair, the article, where they have shown the algorithm where we should decide for whether it's a good patient for right thoracotomy. So when the AR is more than 1, and there is a severe MS, mitral annular calcification, when there is a LV dysfunction or dilatation, when there is a pulmonary hypertension, if anything happens, yes, then you should go for sternal approach. And if these are ruled out from the echo, then you start ruling out the aortoiliac atherosclerosis there or not. Femoral artery diameter is if it is less than 7 millimeters, and if this is a pectus excavatum, and there is then you should go for robotic approach. Otherwise, if this sternal approach is possible before that, and in sternal approach, you can also go for upper mini sternotomy and lower mini sternotomy as well, because here you are not going to deal with the peripheral circulation, because in partial sternotomy cases, you can go for cannulation in the central area as well. So now we are talking about mitral valve exposure techniques, and this is the good diagram which is showing some of the commonly available techniques. This A is the superior left atrial approach, and this is the B is the transverse septal approach of Dubost, and C is the conventional most commonly used left atriotomy approach. And there is a mini transseptal and extended superior transseptal approaches. Let's discuss a little bit in detail. The interatrial approach is going to the LA through the Sondergaard's groove. The incision is behind this fat pad around in the interatrial groove, and anterior to the right superior right pulmonary veins. And incision is extending from the SVC to the middle of the RIPV and IVC. The additional maneuvers you can use in this interatrial approach to expose more of the mitral valve is we can dissect vena cavas from the pericardial tissue, and the upward traction can be placed on the caval tapes. And even LA incision can be extended between the IVC and RIPV, and even a little bit in the superior area on the SVC. And there is a one modified approach for classic Dubois bilateral incision. Here the same incision like interatrial approach, 1 centimeter incision is perpendicular to the atrial incision is added, involving the right atrium vertically and the septum transversely up to the fossa ovalis. And this adjunct technique replaces the classic Dubois bilateral incision, where the both atrias were incised. This is a transseptal first diagram. That colored one diagram shows the mini transseptal approach, where the right atrium is incised, and the mitral valve is exposed to the incision over the fossa ovalis, and extending towards the gap, towards the area between the coronary sinus and IVC. And this diagram is the modification of Dubois transeptal approach, whereas there is a vertical RA and extending to the RA right atriotomy, left and extending that incision to in the RSPV, and this perpendicular to that, you open the atrial septum slightly ahead for the fossa ovalis. This transeptal approach is better in the previous aortic valve replacement patients, where and even in small LA patients, or the when there is a presence of severe adhesions between the RA and pericardium, and we are not it is difficult to go toward the LA. This approach is also favored in giant LA as well, to obtain the easier access to the mitral valve, and the position and to position the incision in the incision in this transeptal approach is in the high flow velocity blood flows, so there is a less chance of clot formation later in the incised area. And there is one extended transeptal approach also, where the upper portion of these transeptal incisions is extended over the superior area of LA dome area. And this is this will provide the outstanding exposure. But the challenge is to reapproximate that. There is a superior approach for small LA patients, and when you are using upper mini sternotomy approach, and this transverse incision in the roof of LA, this SVC is retracted, and aortic ascending aorta is retracted after giving the cardioplegia, and the transverse incision is made on the roof of the LA, and we have to be as far as from the aortic origin as possible, and incision is directed leftwards and posteriorly. This gives the direct view of the mitral valve, very good view, and particular care we have to take is during the closure of the atrial incision, because it will be very difficult if it's a bleeding when you are weaned off from CPB, and because the aorta and SVC will be fully distended later. Now there was a biatrial approach of Guaridin, and which was used in small LA and deep chest. What we do was there is our right atriotomy, and the incision was extended caudally on the intraatrial septum as well, and
Second.
it is completed by extending that septal incision in the roof of the LA.
Jatesh,
So it's a biatrial approach because RA and LA both were open.
Jatesh,
Yes, sir.
just hold on. Sharmil, can you take your photograph away from the screen?
Sir, it is on the screen of Dr. Jaitesh, not my screen, so I cannot do that. He has to do it.
Okay, continue.
Yes, sir. There are some rare.
Jatesh,
You have to live with it, sir.
इसको मिनिमाइज नहीं कर सकते क्या? मेरा जो बीच में ये नीचे आ रहा है, इसको बंद कर दो. अच्छा, बंद करते तो ये होता है.
या वो
Yeah, this is
स्क्रीन
perfect.
शेयर कर रहा हूँ मैं
This is-
मोबाइल पे. It's different.
हाँ, ये ठीक है, अब ठीक है.
अभी
हो
ठीक
गया
है.
ठीक ठीक. So there were some rare, when very rarely used approaches for mitral valve are the transaortic approach, where it was used for double valve replacement of AVR and MVR, and there was a mitral valve surgery through left ventriculotomy as well. And there's one paper which showed by beating heart mitral valve replacement as well, where the aorta was cross clamped and the myocardial protection was given by giving continuous warm oxygenated blood through the coronary sinus, and mitral valve was repaired. And he published 23 cases, and with good mortality of 5%, like that. So when mitral valve is exposed, there's a time to analyze the valve, whether it's repairable or not. So to aim, the aim of valve analysis is to confirm and modify the pre-op echo findings, the functional type of the regurgitation and mitral valve region, and segmental localization where the defect is located. So and also to check the LA wall endocardial thickening as well, and whether there is a thrombus or not, calcification is there or not, and jet lesions on the LA wall are noted. Mitral valve annulus for dilatation, shape, and calcification as well, and subvalvular apparatus. So the valve analysis starts from P1, which is the reference point for the. We use the nerve hook for the P1, and the other other scallops, other segments of the mitral valve are checked according to P1. Now suppose the P1 is considered as reference point because least it's a least affected valve in the mitral valve lesions. And now suppose if P1 is affected, so check for any other segment which is normal, and if it's not there, then correct one segment and make it as a reference point. So it's a valve analysis. The fundamental principles of valve reconstruction is this A diagram shows that we have to preserve or restore the normal leaflet motion, which is the plane of that leaflet closure should be in the normal part. And B shows that there should be a good large surface area of coaptation as well. And the third principle is to remodel and stabilize the annulus with the band. So the Carpenter's classification, the famous Carpenter classification, is shows that these are type 1 whether when it's a normal leaflet motion. Normal leaflet motion means the course of the leaflets between the systole and diastole will be having normal amplitude, and the free edges of these two leaflets will be positioned something 5 to 10 millimeters below the plane of the annulus. And regurgitation will be due to lack of coaptation between these two leaflets. So this could happen because of annular distension, because of leaflet perforation, vegetation, or leaflet tear. Here the plane will not be distorted, only thus coaptation is the main problem. In type 2, there is a leaflet prolapse, where the if you see the leaflet is going above the plane of the orifice. So the free edge of these leaflets overriding the plane of the mitral valve orifice during systole, and which will result in the jack opposite to that leaflet. Opposite leaflet will be having that jet, and this jet will run obliquely towards the opposite wall. That main thing we have to diagnose in the pre-op echo is what is the degree of prolapse, which is showing the level which is going upwards amplitude, and the extent of prolapse. That means the free margin which is affected in the leaflet. Uh, Now type 3. Type 3 is the restricted leaflet motion. 3A is diastolic, and this also happens in the systole as well. But the main thing is during the opening of the valve, type 3 is defined restricted leaflet motion. And type 3 diastolic causes will be the commissural fusion, leaflet thickenings, and caudal thickening and fusion as well. And type 3 is mostly due to ischemic problems when the valve is okay, but because of teasering of the valve, because of MI and ventricular dilatation, the MR is happening. So let's come to the surgical technique part. There's a closed mitral commissurotomy where there was the patient in sinus rhythm should be present, and when the patient is having isolated non-calcific MS and patient is symptomatic in sinus rhythm. So approach was left anterolateral thoracotomy, and pleural space was entered via fifth intercostal space and pericardium opened from MPA to the diaphragm. And two purse strings we are needing, and there's one at the LV apex, which will be used for using this Stubbs dilator to dilate the stenosed mitral valve, and there will be LA appendage purse string for valve analysis with the surgeon's right finger, and end of the guidance of the dilator. And the Tubbs dilator introduced in the mitral valve will be subsequently we can say progressively it will be dilated, starting from 2.4 up to 4 centimeter, and after every dilatation there should be a complete recovery allowed between the dilatation. And if you find MR or calcification after this dilatation, you have to stop on that dilatation, so not going further. There's this open mitral commissurotomy where when pure MS is there with the commissural fusion, but leaflets are pliable, that means freely mobile, and non-fused subvalvular apparatus should be there. So what's happening over here is we should analyze we should provide the traction to the um, anterior chordae to see the commissural groove, and in that groove make the incision. Here in this diagram, it's written 5 mm from the annulus, but Kirkland suggested that it should be 2 to 3 mm annulus um, gap between the annulus, the hinge part, and the leaflet commissure. And this is important to maintain the integrity of the commissure. And this incision is carried forward up from to the center of the orifice, and we have to go slow and see the underlined chordae as well. And if the chordae are fused, you have to bisect the papillary muscles chordae as well, um, to make the subvalvular apparatus also important if suppose it's a fused one. And even the fused chordae can be given better outcomes with the wedge resection of these chordae as shown in this F diagram. So this is a OMC, and the paper I was discussing before, the 10 commandments of mitral valve repair, they published this paper in the 2020. They have mentioned these 10 commandments. We have to study the intraoperative pre-repair echocardiogram properly, and we have to choose the safest chest wall approach before going for repair. So to obtain the good valve exposure as well. And first place the angioplasty sutures first, and inspect the wall properly and choose repair techniques that will work for the surgeon. And we have to use the prosthetic annuloplasty band as well, so to decrease the late outcomes of the annular dilatation, and avoid SAM by maintaining the leaflet heights of coaptation. And we have to wait for the recovery of ventricular function before assessing whether it's a good repair or not. And we should not accept a bad repair as well, because bad repair is um, very bad than replacement. So mitral valve repair techniques, the repair rather than the replacement is the procedure of choice for treating MR. The mastery of only handful of repair techniques enables us to repair more than 90% of degenerative valves, and the selection of techniques should be based on the etiology and functional type of regurgitation. This diagram shows that the anterior posterior diameter and transverse diameter, the normal is 3:2, and we have to maintain that even for the repair techniques with the band. And if we see this chart, it shows the overall survival after this repair and replacement. Because it suggests that why repair was better than replacement as the process of choice, because the percentage of survival was in repair was just near to the expected survival of the patient's normal population, and for replacement the it was significantly lower side. So the anterior and bileaflet primary valve mitral valve disease requires extensive repair, and durability of the repair is uh, less certain than posterior leaflet intervention. And freedom from reoperation was suggested that 80% freedom is there in 20 years. And recurrent MR freedom was 60% in 20 years for complex cases. Uh, this is the reoperation after mitral valve repair, where you see the blue line suggests the posterior mitral leaflet repair, and a red line suggests the anterior mitral leaflet repair. So yes, there was a significant difference between the posterior leaflet repair and anterior leaflet repair. And if in this second diagram also, anterior mitral repair was followed, um, and the patient was more in the risk. Uh, to before making the band sutures or wall sutures, we have to understand this diagram. So to place the sutures properly. So here we see the anterolateral commissure. Near to the anterolateral commissure, there is a circumflex artery relationship with the mitral valve. So we have to save that circumflex artery, which is more nearer in the just below the anterolateral trigon, and also the coronary sinus which was laterally in the circumflex, near the circumflex artery in the anterolateral commission, but it comes in the more nearer to the in the posterior leaflet area. And in the posterior middle trigone, there is a bundle of his, and we have to protect it. And there is a aortic valve annulus with the left coronary sinus and non-coronary sinus leaflets. And for that also we have to avoid that before in taking sutures. So there's a remodeling ring annuloplasty, which is the basic thing for mitral valve repair, for any repair. So let's understand it first. We have to restore the normal ratio of and shape of the annulus. This A and anterior posterior diameter and transverse diameter will be maintained, and even these angles alpha and beta will be maintained. This is important because when posterior dilatation is there, then alpha beta angles dilates more. So this band maintains that distance. It will improve the surface area of the leaflet coaptation. It will improve the longevity of the repair by preventing the late dilatation. And appropriate ring sizing is based on the intercommissural distance and the height of the anterior leaflet, and where the height of the anterior leaflet is more preferred one. But if the free edge of the anterior leaflet will be extending like 2 to 4 millimeters beyond this inferior edge of the sizer, the ring which is larger should be selected to prevent the SAM of the anterior mitral valve leaflet. Though assessment of repair is by saline test, and after completion of the leaflet repair and again after ring implantation, but before tying the annuloplasty ring sutures. So this symmetric line of coaptation parallel to the posterior part of the remodeling ring and at a reasonable distance from the alveoli will indicate that it's a successful repair. And with the valve in the closed position, the ratio between these visible areas of the anterior leaflet and posterior leaflet will be 3:1. That also certifies it's a significant repair. And ideal coaptation length will be ranging from 4 to 10 millimeter. Uh, if the coaptation length is less than 4 millimeter, it should be corrected by resection of this restrictive cordes or cleft closures or downsizing the ring, because shorter coaptation will limits that repair outcome. And now if depth is more than 10 millimeter, which will cause the SAM, so it also has to be corrected before weaning. Now the techniques, the principle mentioned by the Carpentier was one lesion, one technique principle. So it is very important to identify the functional classification of the valve before repairing it. And if there is a if in we talk about posterior leaflet prolapse in the type 2 classification, if there is a limited prolapse, that means there is a less than 1/3 of free margin affected. So the technique we use is triangular leaflet transection. If it is extensive prolapse, we use is quadrangular resection. And we will see it one by one. The alternate techniques for caudal rupture will be transposition techniques and even composite techniques where multiple techniques are used for it. And caudal elongation is improved with caudal shortening. Anterior leaflet prolapse also is classified according to the same thing. The limited prolapse, that means 1/4 of the length of the prolapsed area, which will be dealt with the leaflet triangular resection, and alternative will be leaflet fixation for the secondary cordes. And extensive prolapse if present will be having caudal transposition can be done, and caudal replacement can be done with the artificial cordes. And if there is a papillary muscle involvement, then you can go for papillary muscle sliding, shortening, and chordae shortening replacement as well. So this is a triangular leaflet resection where the triangular wedge of this prolapsed area of the posterior leaflet here shown is transected, and the sutures are taken from the tips of this prolapsed area, and it is approximated in the middle, and sutures are tied down. This can also be made in the anterior leaflet as well. This is the quadrangular leaflet resection, where when the leaflet height is less than 20 millimeters. So the no requirement of leaflet reduction. But if there is a leaflet height is more than 20 millimeter, see this small triangular wedge transaction area, to reduce the leaflet height, to reduce the possibility of SAM. And if there is extensive leaflet prolapse, you should add the sliding leaflet technique as well, where the after quadrangular transaction, the incisions from the annulus to the left and both sides are placed, and these cut edges of the quadrangular section are opposed in the medially by the sutures. There is one technique called folding plasty, which is replacing this sliding technique. In this folding plasty, quadrangular rejection was placed, and the sutures are taken from the mid part of this cut annulus and the mid part of these leaflet margins, and these are approximated in the middle, and as shown in this fourth diagram, it is approximated properly. This reduces the height of this posterior leaflet as well, so it's giving better outcome as opposed to sliding one. So the other technique will be the leaflet fixation on the secondary cordae, where if the distance from the prolapse segment is less than 5 millimeter of this attached cordae, secondary cordae, these are attached as shown here. These prolapse cordae are attached to this fixed. These leaflets are fixed to the secondary cordae here, like that. If in this is less than 5 millimeter, and suppose the distance of the secondary cordae from the prolapse leaflet margin is more than 5 millimeter, so it's better to go for secondary cordae transposition. It is giving the better outcome. This is the posterior leaflet cordae transposition. When the normal posterior cordaes are transected, and these are transferred to this anterior leaflet, and this, if possible, we have to even transect this papillary muscle to gain better approximation with this anterior leaflet, so that this prolapse of the anterior leaflet can be corrected with the posterior leaflet cordae. And the artificial cordae formation by loop technique, if we see here when the cordaes are ruptured, the surgeon uses the caliber to measure the proper length of the cordaes, and we make the loops by PTFE grafts in the outside, and these pre-made loops are attached to the papillary muscle and the leaflet as well. And there is one more technique of figure of 8 suture technique, where this diagram, I don't know why it's not coming. So what happens is you take a suture and with the use of figure of 8, place it on the papillary muscle, and these papillary muscles are with the help of traction and proper height measurement with the leaflet, these leaflets are also made. These leaflets are attached with the papillary muscles, making the artificial cordae with the height approximation properly. Now this papillary muscle sliding plasty, for when the papillary muscles are fused, where this papillary muscles are transected, and when the height of the transected papillary muscle will be the outcome of this leaflet prolapse improvement in the height will be same. Suppose this you transect x of the height of the papillary muscle, the cordaes will be corrected with the same distance, and this is the sliding plasty of the papillary muscle. And there's a cordae shortening. Suppose there's a lengthening of the cordaes, and in this the difference is when you are correcting the cordaes distance, you have to understand that if you are using this the distance of the papillary muscle cordae in incision, the double of the result will be there in the free margin prolapse. This is a papillary muscle shortening, where the wedge part of this papillary muscle was shortened, and the thing was corrected. And even that caudal shortening, all x by 2, the distance covered by the cordae will be double that wedge resection. This is the extensive prolapse caused by papillary muscle. When there is a papillary muscle rupture, when which this is the causing the leaflet prolapse. This ruptured papillary muscle will be approximated to the ventricular wall and sutured. And if there is a papillary muscle elongation, the papillary muscle, fibrous papillary muscle, can be transected, and even there can be application of these papillary muscles to reduce the height. So we come to mitral valve replacement, which shows that there is a classic procedure of mitral valve replacement, and the preferred one should be chordal sparing procedure. Uh, uh, Typically, the chordal sparing procedure, the posterior leaflet is left intact, and the tissue is used to better support for valve replacement suture. But anterior leaflet, um, it should be transferred if it is to be retained, or otherwise it will be displayed. If you are not, if you are leaving the anterior mitral leaflet, it will be displaced in the LVOT by the valve process and obstructed flow. So and the orientation of this bioprosthetic orientation is something 1:30, 5:30, and 9:30 o'clock positions. And this is important because the struts, hinge guards in this um, bioprosthetic leaflet will go towards this mm, LVOT area. So better to lie these struts over these positions. In mechanical valve, the position is not very important. The important thing is the leaflet should be in the opening of the leaflets and closing should be in the plane of that mitral valve acuteness. And um, replacement is performed in patients in whom repair is not suitable. So there's a classic procedure where the incision is started at the 12 o'clock position in the anterior mitral leaflet, because it's the least affected area in the base of the annulus leaflet. And the incision is excision of the valve is transferred left to right from this same incision. And if you need to spare the cordes, and we have to decide whether or not. So there are two techniques of taking the valve sutures: the continuous suture technique and interrupted suture technique. Um, Interrupted suture technique, the important thing is to know whether we have to take everting or not. Everting means the sutures are taken from the atrial side and placed on taken out from the ventricular side, so the margins of this annulus gets everted, and the valve is placed in the intraannular area. The main thing to for intraannular is will be minimizing any possibility of any paravalvular leak. So the last topic is caudal preservation. It's a very important thing to restore the LV shape. So to restore that, the good functions were achieved. So the caudal sparing procedure is more preferred in mitral valve replacement. It started from the Lilly-High in 1964 with the PML preservation. Then further came this David's technique, where um, this posterior leaflet resection was made, and also the triangular wedge of the anterior leaflet was made in the middle, and the cordes were preserved. And these resected anterior leaflet and posterior leaflet were used in this while placing the sutures for the valve. And the maintenance of the chordae in their natural anatomic orientation is the good thing about David's technique, and it reduces the risk of LVOT obstruction and reduces the bulk of the leaflet tissue. And there comes this Feek's technique, when the AML is split from the center of the free edge towards the annulus, and the incision is carried forward on the both sides to split the two commissures as well. And these two commissures, two halves of these leaflets, anterior leaflets, along with their cordes, are trimmed, and the thickened cordes can be removed, and the normal cordes are sutured to and then rotated posteriorly and sutured to these posterior mitral annulus. But the problem is it disturbs the normal geometric relationship, in contrast to David's technique. which can change the LV wall stress, and it will disturb the caudal tension on the papillary muscle, and which will eventually can cause dysfunction of the LV. So it is not preferred as compared to David's. So some more techniques like Khonsari technique. There was no reported incidence of LVOT obstruction or interference with the prostatic valve function. Here the AML is detached from the annulus between these two commissures, and ellipse of this incised tissue is excised, and the rim of this leaflet tissue containing the chordae is reattached in the anterior annulus. This was Khonsari 1, and the 2 was if the leaflets is when the leaflets you get is thick or calcified, it is divided into these 2 or 5 segments of these incised leaflet, and these are separately attached to the annulus. This is 2, and the PML was retained completely in this Khonsari technique. There were other techniques called Mickey's technique and Rose and O's technique. This compiles my presentation about surgical management and guidelines. Thank you.
I think there is a limited scope for discussion today, primarily because we are looking at guidelines. But there is one important thing I must bring out, and that is to do with the results of replacement versus repair. Can you put that back on? The 32%, 55%, 60%, something like that. At 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, you see, that is the common knowledge that repairs are superior to replacement in cases of mitral regurgitation. And then we brought this thing into ischemic mitral regurgitation as well, even though this topic is primarily based on primary mitral regurgitation and not ischemic mitral regurgitation. But the problem happens when we start transferring this knowledge towards ischemic mitral regurgitation. Remember that the mechanism of mitral regurgitation in primary mitral regurgitation is leaflet, cord, or annulus. In ischemic mitral regurgitation, the mechanism is LV wall distortion or LV wall remodeling. Okay, with the LV wall remodeling comes papillary muscle traction, inferior, posterior, and lateral. Okay, with
Yes.
that move of the posterior papillary muscle down and south, you have ischemic mitral regurgitation. It can be fixed by a repair, but because the wall, the left ventricular wall disease may not reverse, it might be progressive. So what you do at the time of operation might become insufficient shortly thereafter. This is what was proven by the CTS network trial. There is a randomized trial published in 2016-17 in NANIJA. 250 odd patients, equally balanced cases. And patients with repair did not do better than replacement at 1 year and 2 years. In fact, at 2 years, many patients with repairs started failing. And the reason was progressive dilatation of the left ventricle. Whether it must have been the cause of the mitral valve failure because the annuloplasty rings remained intact. There were no new caudal issues that came up. Most of it was because of a type, a restrictive type of caudal issues. So, if you have ischemic mitral regurgitation, you cannot state for sure that these results will hold of repair versus replacement. That becomes dependent on what the ventricular geometry is, whether there is papillary muscle separation, whether there is rounding of sphericalization of the left ventricle. And therefore, ischemic mitral patients one needs to apply a lot of mind on the echo preoperatively before you go ahead. Dr. Raja?
Yes, sir.
Anything else we need to add? We're primarily discussing guidelines today.
हाँ, मैं टेक्निक्स में तो बहुत सारी चीजें ऐड कर सकते हैं. गाइडलाइंस आई थिंक वी नीड टू फिगर वी दे आर ऑलरेडी ऑन डिस्प्ले.
Yeah.
Nothing much to add on the guidelines part.
Yeah. And how about techniques?
Yeah, techniques, I think they need to figure out the advantages and disadvantages of each of the technique. I mean, when they have enumerated the techniques, but which technique to be used in which subset of patients. Regarding guidelines, one more thing, so we haven't made too much of an similar to the fact that ischemic versus non-ischemic. We in India we see a lot of rheumatic activity, and rheumatic repair versus rheumatic replacement. That is another thing that should be brought up. I mean, we need to make a comment on that. Do you have, Jaytesh, do you have any study which compares rheumatic repairs and durability of those in the mitral location?
Sir, they have mentioned one book that the outcome of this repair of the rheumatic was 50%, even in the expert hands. This was a line. I will find the studies.
That's what is very important to realize, that while practicing in countries where rheumatic activity is very predominant cause of mitral lesions, especially in the regurgitant lesions, it will be very difficult to mix lesions and pure regurgitant lesions. The repairs don't hold good. If you are doing stenotic lesions, then still I would say that doing a balloon would buy you some more time, and if indicated well, if it's indicated well. Even open mitral commissurotomy would give you some more years of acetrom period, non-oral anticoagulating period. The risk of oral anticoagulation is important to be kept in mind. So pure stenotic lesions in well indicated rheumatics, they still repair can work. But mixed lesions and rheumatic MR, they don't hold very well. Even in the literature, there's a series published from AIIMS also. Both in the aortic position, the outcomes of even the Ross procedure there have been quoted that they don't hold very well, and even the mitral repairs in the rheumatic etiology they don't hold for very long. So I think that also from indication point of view, because no Western literature will put that in the perspective. They see a lot of degenerative disease, they see myxomatic problems, but they don't see rheumatic as much. So we have to figure out what is best for our eggs in the basket.
You see, if you look at how Tavisak does his operations in Bangkok,
right,
the detail with which he is repairing mitral regurgitation, rheumatic mitral regurgitations, I don't know if anybody else has developed that much patience. He uses a 15 blade and 11 blade combination and literally shaves off all leaflets, all leaflet components, shaves off the kind of the fibrous tissue of all the chordae one by one, and then gets a beautiful natural looking valve. His results at 10 years are extremely good, but if you want to do mitral repair for regurgitant lesions or mixed lesions or even stenosis, I think everybody who wishes to do that must visit Tavisak and work with him for about 2 weeks. Unless you do these procedures perfectly well, if you do it like, and I have seen bad results as well. I have seen terrible results by some of the top experts of the world who come to do conferences and they show their technique, and ultimately at the end of the procedure, the mitral valve orifice area is 1.2. So you don't get too much out of those patients. And these patients obviously will be coming back very, very quickly for surgery. One word about the approach to the left atrium. I think the standard approach in all patients, unless they have very large left atrium, very large would be over 6 centimeters, should be by deep dissection of the groove of Sondergaard. If you have a deep dissection of the groove of Sondergaard, you can manage easily anything between 3.5 to 5 centimeters of left atrium. That there is usually no problem. The problems mostly arise because we fail to mobilize the SVC and the IVC. Once you mobilize the SVC, IVC and hook them up and towards the left, then your approach becomes direct to the mitral valve. If you have a leaking cross clamp and the aorta is full, you will almost never be able to display the top left corner of the mitral annulus. So if you are having difficulty in approaching the top left corner of the mitral valve, the lateral trigone, then you might as well have a quick look at whether the aorta is flat or not. Aorta being flat is very important for you to be displace the SVC towards the left side. Extended transseptal and transseptal approaches are very nice, very, very nice. The problem with the transseptal approach you will ever face is if you make the incision in the septum a little anterior than the bang in the middle of the fossa vallis. If you come a little anterior, you will lose the tissue with which you're going to close it because the annulus is not very far. That's where your mitral valve is going to sit. So once the mitral valve sits there, you lose about 4 or 5 millimeters of the tissue around it to stitch. And then your life becomes miserable because you don't have enough tissue to stitch. And this problem becomes even more acute once you are in the extended transseptal approach. The trick in the extended transseptal approach is not to be turning your scissors towards the base of the heart. Do not turn it down when you have incised at the roof. You really need to be looking at this, the bottom picture on the right side. If you look at it, you're more or less coming close to the left atrial appendage there. That's the direction to follow. If you follow a little further towards the lower part, towards the trigone, you'll again lose that important 5-7 millimeters, which is required to stitch. If you don't have that material, you're going to have a massive bleed. That is an unforgiving place for you. So stay away from the aortic root, keep the aorta flat, keep the aorta retracted to the lateral side, and then go a little towards the left atrial appendage and not between the left atrial appendage and the annulus. Is that, I think that's plenty for today. Any other comment?
Sir, one question from the guideline. They have said ki if the LV systolic dimensions are more than 40 and LV is 60%, and there are likelihood of repair is more than 95%. For rheumatic patients also, how we can judge that this likelihood would be more than 95%? We can go ahead and repair that.
This is not for rheumatic. This is primarily for patients who got primary mitral regurgitation. These recommendations are for primary mitral regurgitation, not for secondary mitral regurgitations, not even ischemic.
Yes.
So this is what I was saying, that these guidelines are focused on a different set of patients. This is by the Western world. It's not for us. Very difficult to extrapolate data from here and apply it to our set of patients.
But these are the new guidelines, and they will be tested on these guidelines whether they apply to us or not. Yeah. So they are like we actually do not see so many patients with primary mitral regurgitation. And we always try to avoid patients who have got calcific mitral regurgitation.
Yes, sir.
Shall we call it a day today?
Yes, I'm also done, sir.
Yeah, Jatesh, thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.
Good presentation,
Thank
lucid. But I request everybody from next time, do not try to use your mobile phones. Try to have a stable internet connection and do it from a laptop at least. Okay? This
Yes.
telephone, often there is a mess with the telephones. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.